So is Portugal the most sustainable country ever? Well, for 6 days, they were certainly very sustainable because they ran on renewable energy for 6 days. Pretty cool. We'll talk about how they did it and some surprising outputs from this a little later on in the show. If you want to skip right to that, there should be timestamps down below. But if you want to stick around, we'll also be talking about a pending court case that is set to help out land defenders in Brazil, a new report about abuses in the fishing industry, and some updates on that court case that was about youth challenging the Montana state government. This is Eco Show. Hello and welcome to Eco Show. This is a show about ecology, the environment, and things generally happening in that kind of space. We'll go through different news from the past week and some different interesting stories. Usually I try to pick out ones that are uplifting, but we've got some kind of heavier articles this week, so apologies for that, but they were pretty interesting and are good things to keep in the know about. So strap in. We'll have some good news. The Portugal stuff at the end is nice. Good news, a nice little cherry on top of the rest of the news this week. That's not so much fun. So our first news piece this week is about land defenders in the Amazon and this pending court case that's going to be going on. So a little bit of background on this is that in the Amazon, there are lots of land defenders that are murdered every year. People who are trying to keep out people from doing illegal logging or burning down land that's on indigenous territory. And in just 20 years, more than 53 Guajajara or Guajajara have been killed. Let's say more than 53 in just 20 years. More than 53 Guajajara have been killed, which is an indigenous group there. And none of the perpetrators have ever been tried before. So these murders happen by gunmen that'll be hired by loggers or people that are wanting to cut down land to be able to convert it into pasture. But there was a recent killing of a Guajajara man in land defender, and this one is going to court. His name is Paulino Guajajara, and it's the first time that this is happening, that this will be going to court. So we have a photo of the land defenders here, and so they'll go around on their motorcycles and just make sure nobody's intruding in on the land. And we've got a photo here of the land in particular, and you can see just how, so this land in the middle here, Arariboya, and this land, you can see that the forest is pretty intact there, but in the surrounding areas, it's all really chopped up and everything like that. So there's a lot of intrusions that happen into this land, and it's not too big. So they've got this sort of area that's meant to be protected for them, but there's still a lot of murders that go on and things like that. So we've got a little bar up the top that's 50 kilometers. So you can see it's a little bit over 50 kilometers wide and about 50 kilometers tall. So not really that big of an area, all in all. And here's a photo of Paulino, who was murdered, and this has been elevated to higher levels in the courts there now, and there's sort of an understanding that this is signifying a recognition of rights to protect your land. So if the person is prosecuted, then it's kind of going to be seen as pretty beneficial for the land defenders, and that they have a right to do what they're doing on their land. So we'll keep an eye on that case. And switching from forest and forest issues, we're switching over to issues in the fishing industry. So there's, you may or may not have heard, but the fishing industry is pretty well known as being pretty exploitative. And there's a lot of issues around that. There's a lot of forced labor conditions that go on. And there was a big report that just came out by the Financial Transparency Coalition. And so they're looking and trying to figure out, how do you get to the root of this problem? And a big problem that they were pointing out is that ship owners, so the owners of these vessels, are not able to be held to account because it's really challenging to track who owns them. So will be shell companies and weird contracts that makes it really hard to track who owns these vessels. So it's really hard to prosecute any sort of labor conditions because you can't even find who owns the boat. So they have found 475 cases of forced labor since 2010, and they could only identify owners on 20% of those. So you could probably imagine that the number of cases that are just reported that they're able to find of 475 is already probably, you imagine it would be less than what's happening in reality. And this only 20% of those can you even identify the owners, let alone start to prosecute those owners, just shows how much of an issue this situation is. And so what sort of goes on here is that you get workers that are on these boats that are will be from different places and will often be held in contracts where they owe money, and they're stuck in essentially slavery conditions on these boats. So there's an estimated 128,000 fishermen that are trapped at sea in these either just outright slavery or in these exploitative conditions. And yeah, like we said, different things like withholding wages or debt bondage, or just physical violence keeps people trapped on these boats. And a lot of times these boats may just be out at sea for extremely long periods of time and can get resupplied. So it's like you don't even have a chance to escape the boat because it's just out at sea for so long. So a pretty nasty situation there. And this report is recommending a public registry of boat owners and treating forced labor as a crime, which are two kind of wild things that didn't already exist. So this will require some international treaties in order to enforce those kind of things and to have a public registry that is international. They pointed out that the most common state where the most common country where the flag is flying from these vessels that are reporting for these abuses is from China. And there's this forced labor, illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, lots of issues going on there. And so they said all in all, there were 75% of these boats were from Asian countries and 25% of them were from European countries. So this is really a global issue that's going on. It's kind of nobody's hands are clean. And we've just got a photo from the article here showing a lot of, I think these are shark fins and things like that. So fishing is definitely a very messy industry, and even beyond just the ecological impact, which is kind of an important thing I think to note, is so many of these industries are just nasty. Even beyond what they're doing to the environment is what they're doing to the people, so not good. So we got the bad news on heavy this episode. I apologize for that. On to our last piece of bad news, and this is also another law piece. And so the state case, which was about a group of youths challenging the state of Montana, it was called Held versus the state of Montana, and that case has been dismissed. So we've talked about it before on the show, and it was youths that were challenging the state, saying that they were not living up to what they're required to do constitutionally to protect the environment for future generations. So there were 16 young plaintiffs that wanted to assert their constitutional right to a healthy environment, but the state Supreme Court would not listen to their appeal, so it's now they can't do anything with it anymore. And so this was based, the emphasis originally was that there wasn't accountability from the state government around oil use in terms of when they're giving grants out or letting land lease happening. It wasn't a part of any sort of climate accounting that they're doing. So it's going to lead to future pollution that will endanger future generations. So that's where the youth and these folks were bringing this into court to challenge it. And they're saying essentially they were neglecting a responsibility to maintain a healthy environment. And sort of where this got thrown out is that the part of it was asking the court to require a climate recovery plan. And that's why they're saying it's been thrown out, because the judicial branch can't make the executive branch do things. So even though this did get thrown out, folks are saying that it did set a good precedent. And the main thing is that the plaintiffs were able to get heard earlier on, that they had a legal standing to sue the state on this case of environmental rights. So it does validate the claims that they have, but it was some of the aspects of it that led to it getting thrown out. So these kinds of cases are increasing, and they haven't really had great success so far in terms of policy, but in this article they were saying that this is helping make more legal routes possible for more recourse in the future. So hopefully we start to see these having an impact, but it certainly feels as though the law is a bit of a way that's protecting these states and these organizations from really taking accountability rather than holding them to account at the moment. So we've got a photo here of some of the youths in this case walking. And now on to our good news for this week. So if you've hopped to this section, welcome to the good news part of the show. We had some other not so fun news, but we're in the good stuff now. So Portugal has had 6 straight days of renewable energy for 100 million people. So all of their energy was covered for 6 days by just renewables. And this was on the 27th of October, and then 6 days after that wind and waves were primarily generating their energy supply. They initially predicted that it would last for just a day, but then it ended up going on for 6 days. And the wild thing that I hadn't heard initially, but that was very cool, is that they were even able to export electricity to grids in Spain for several of those days. So of the 149 hours where they were just operating off of renewables, 95 of those hours saw energy being exported to Spain. And much of this was actually during rainy, windy weather, so solar wasn't even the most important. And also the energy bills went to zero for people, for consumers in Portugal. So this is a very cool thing to see happen. Hopefully we're seeing more and more places happen, and great to see that it happened in this rainy, windy weather. So it's like you have some sort of some options. So if it's nice and sunny, but then you have no wind, then you can do that. I don't know how well the European grid is connected all together, but certainly it looks like Portugal and Spain are pretty well connected up there. So we got there pretty quick today, and that's all the news for this week. So hope you're having a good week, and we'll catch you next time. Bye bye.